Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to God's Grace on Thee. In today's chapter in John 10, we find Jesus traveling to Mount Olive, and upon his return in the early morning, he went to the temple, and everyone came to him, and he sat down and talked to them. The scribes and the Pharisees brings a woman to him caught in adultery, in the very act, and they begin to quote Moses' law, stating, an act such as this should result in being stoned. But what do you say? Well, they were testing Jesus so they could find something to accuse him of. And Jesus stooped down on the ground with his finger and started writing, acting as if he did not hear. So when he continued asking him, Jesus raised himself back up and said to them, "You without sin among you, let him throw the stone at her first." Being convicted of their concessions, they left. And Jesus was left alone with the woman, and Jesus raised himself back up and saw no one but the woman, and he said to her, "Where are your accusers? Has no one condemned you?" And she says, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said to her then, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." In verse 12, Jesus spoke to the Pharisees again, to the crowd, saying, "I am the light of the world, and he who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life." And the Pharisee said to him, "You bear witness of yourself. Your witness is not true." When Jesus answered, "Even if I bear witness of myself, my witness is true, for I know where I came from and where I am going. But you do not know where I come from and where I am going. You judge according to the flesh, and I judge no one. And yet if I do judge, my judgment is true, for I am not alone, but I am with the Father who sent me. It is also written in your law that the testimony of two men is true. But I am with the Father who sent me. It is also written in your law that testimony of two men is true. For I am the one who bears witness of myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness of me." In verse 19 through 38, we find Jesus healing a blind man. This man has been blind since birth. And Jesus stoops down, spits on the ground, and he makes clay, and he anoints the eyes of the blind man, telling him to wash and then to come back. And so the man did, and he came back seeing. In chapters 9, verse 39 through 41, I believe is the most profound statement there is. And Jesus said, "For judgment I have come unto this world, and those who do not see may see, that those who see may be made blind." Then some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said to him, "Are we blind also?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say we see. Therefore your sin remains." So what exactly is he stating? Well, the Pharisees cavil at this because they're with him. They're not desirous to learn any good from him, but to form evil against him. And they said, "Are we blind also?" So when Christ said that those who saw should be by his coming be made blind, they apprehended that he meant them who were with the seers of the people, and they valued themselves on their insight and foresight. Now they said, "We know that the common people are blind, but are we blind also? The rabbini, the doctors, they learned in laws, the graduates in the schools, are we blind too?" This is scandalum magnatum, a libel on the great. Those that need reproof most and deserve it best, though they have wit enough to discern a tactic one. They don't have enough grace to bear just one. So these Pharisees took this reproof for a reproach as the lawyers. Are we blind also? You can find that in Luke 11:45. Darest thou say that we are blind, whose judgment everyone has such a veneration for, values, and yields to? Nothing fortifies men's corrupt hearts more against the convictions of the word, nor more especially repels them than the good opinion, especially if it can be a high opinion, which others have of them, as if all had gained applause with men, must needs obtain acceptance with God, than which nothing is more false and deceitful, for God sees not as man sees. Now Christ's answer to this cavil, which if it did not convince them, yet it silenced them. If you were blind, you should have no sin. But now you say, we see, therefore your sin remaineth. Well, they glorified that they were not blind, as the common people. We're not so credulous and manageable as they, but would see with their own eyes, having abilities as they thought sufficient for their own guidance, so that they needed nobody to lead them. Well, this very thing which they glorified in, Christ here tells them, was their shame and ruin. For if you were blind, you would have no sin. If you had been really ignorant, your sin had not been so deeply aggravated, nor would you have had so much sin to answer for as now that you have. If you were blind, as the poor Gentiles are, and many of their own poor subjects from whom you have taken the key of knowledge, you would have had comparatively no sin. So the times of ignorance God winked at is invincibly ignorance. Though it does not justify sin, it excuses it and lessens the guilt. It will be more tolerable with those that perish for lack of vision than those that rebel against the light. So if you had more sensible of your own blindness, if when you would see nothing else, you could not have seen the need of one to lead you, you would soon have accepted Christ as your guide, and then you would have had no sin. You would have submitted to an evangelical righteousness and have been put in a justified state. So those that are convinced of their disease are in a fair way to be cured, for there is not a greater hindrance to the salvation of souls than self-sufficiency. He also says, but now you say, we see. Now that you have knowledge and are instructed out of the law, your sin is highly aggravated. And now that you have a conceit of that knowledge and think you see your way better than anybody can show it to you, therefore your sin remains. So your case is desperate and your disease is incurable. And as those that are most blind, who will not see, so their blindness is most dangerous, who fancy that they do see. No patients are so hardly managed as those in a frenzy, who say that they're well and nothing ails them. The sin of those who are self-conceited and self-confident remains, for they reject the gospel of grace, and therefore they are guilty of their sin, and it remains unpardoned. And they forfeit the spirit of grace, and therefore the power of their sin remains unbroken. Seest thou a wise man in his own conceit? Hearest thou the Pharisees say, we see? There is more hope of a fool, of a publican and a harlot, than of such. Very, very interesting, wise words. And that's what was so profound to me. And I hope that this finds you in more understanding of the verses of Jesus. Be sure to share your smile. Smiles are contagious and they're full of love. When you're smiling, you're not in fear, you're not mad, you're not angry, and you're not judgmental. And be sure and hug someone that you love, because life is so very short. And do something really special for someone that you don't even know, because we are the angels here on earth. And we're here to help one another out and to give each other one a helping hand up. Okay? So with that, I'm going to say, enjoy the rest of your day. God be with you. May He shine His perpetual light upon you, upon your family, and upon all your loved ones. Go with peace. I love you all. Love you. See you. Bye.